spells, a cooler night in the east and a chance of seeing a patchy rural frost. So into Tuesday, we've got that cloud moving in from the west, bringing some outbreaks of rain and drizzle to the far north and west, with the best chance of any sunny spells in the south and east. Looking through the rest of the week, it'll be generally settled for many, with a few outbreaks of rain towards midweek and temperatures above average.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Good afternoon. It's just after 1 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. A man has been charged in connection with disarray outside a hotel housing asylum seekers in Knowsley on Friday night. 19-year-old Jared Skeet from Liverpool has been charged with violent disorder and assault by beating of an emergency worker. He'll appear at Wirral Adult Remand Court tomorrow. Merseyside police are saying that the violence, where fireworks were thrown at officers and a police van set alight, left one officer and 2 members of the public injured. 14 other people who were arrested have now been released on bail. The Labour Party is urging the BBC chairman to consider his position after MPs found that he'd breached standards when applying for the role. A cross-party committee says that Richard Sharp made significant errors of judgment when he failed to declare that he'd helped Boris Johnson to secure a loan when he was Prime Minister. Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell is questioning whether he's still able to uphold trust and independence in the broadcaster.
Damning report. It really is an unprecedented report, means that Mr Sharp's position is increasingly untenable, and he really should now reflect on whether he's able to carry out that very important role as the BBC chair to uphold public trust and independence of the BBC.
Turkey has ordered the detention of 113 suspects in connection with the construction of buildings that collapsed in Monday's earthquakes. It comes as the death toll in Turkey and Syria rose to more than 28,000. Some rescue operations have been halted in Turkey after reports of looting, whilst hundreds of thousands of people have been made homeless in the middle of winter. Unal Sevikov is the former Turkish ambassador to the United Kingdom. He told us the focus now must be the survivors.
The search and rescue operations are probably coming to an end because it has been almost a week now. And although yesterday there were some survivors who have been rescued from under the rubble, I think it is probably coming to an end. Now, the most important thing is the sustainability of the survivors and to create the living conditions for them, because it is very difficult. There's still no electricity and no heating.
Well, back here, the search for missing mum Nicola Bully is now in its 17th day as police continue to investigate. Today, yellow ribbons with messages of hope were tied to a bridge over the River Wyre near where Ms Bully was last seen. She disappeared on the 27th of January while walking her dog shortly after dropping her two daughters at school. Lancashire Police says it's keeping an open mind in its appeal for information. The brother of murdered 2-year-old James Bolger says he'll never forgive the killers 3 decades after the crime. James was snatched from a shopping centre and killed by 2 men, formerly known as John Venables and Robert Thompson, when they were aged 10 in Merseyside in 1993. John Venables is currently behind bars, and Michael Fergus says he should stay there to give justice for James. Workers at Heathrow Airport are to vote on whether to stage fresh strikes after rejecting the latest pay rise offer. Unite says over 3,000 of its members, including security guards, engineers and firefighters, will begin the month-long ballot on the 17th of February. The union says the offered 10% salary increase amounts to a pay cut when compared to the rate of inflation. A second unidentified flying object has been shot down by the US military, this time over Canada. Canadian forces will now recover and analyse the wreckage of the cylindrical object. It's believed to be similar to the Chinese surveillance balloon, which was shot down off the coast of the US around a week ago. Former CIA Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaffer told GB News there's no confirmation that the Chinese were responsible this time.
He's being very reluctant to release all the information they have. Why that is, I can't answer that. But the 2 objects that they shot down, I think, are drones. They're some sort of unmanned object, remotely piloted, something that is designed to go, I think they said 40,000 to 50,000 feet. These things can interfere with air travel. I think that's the legitimate reason they shot them down. But DOD, the Pentagon's just not saying everything they know at this point. And I don't know why that is.
Bit of showbiz for you, and Harry Styles dominated the Brit Awards last night, winning all 4 of the awards he was nominated for, including Album and Artist of the Year. The former One Direction star acknowledged what he called his privilege in his speeches. The annual music event at London's O2 Arena faced a backlash over its gender-neutral categories this year. It's after the Best Artist list featured male performers only. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Alastair, Stewart and friends.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. And a very good afternoon to all of you. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak recently pledged rapidly to purge 400 pieces of European Union legislation that still sit on the UK statute book. The parliamentary process is underway. Some suggest it is even more than that, and it may take years. Well, I recently listened to some of the debate that was going on in the House of Lords, and I heard the brilliant Michael Dobbs, the playwright and novelist of House of Cards fame, accusing some of his fellow peers of dragging their feet with the whole process. And it just drew my attention to the old adage that many of our elite ruling class never really wanted to leave the European Union and perhaps will continue to use all manner of devices to prevaricate when it comes to actually getting the thing done. Now, the European Union and the European Economic Community before it, of course, needed a rule book to protect the cherished single market and indeed the core values of the free mobility of goods, labour and capital. Get it wrong and the penalties can be severe. Now, none of this should be confused with the European Convention on Human Rights, which is nobbling so many UK attempts at the moment to control our own borders that we now have the power so to do, having left the European Union via Brexit. That is an entirely separate device and a separate structure of courts and the rest of it. Although the Guardian newspaper, interestingly, recently reported that they realise in Brussels that there is a growing problem with illegal migration. Front page of The Observer today is also well worth mulling over. It reports that a secret cross-party summit has been held to address the failure of Brexit and to how remedy, they go on to suggest, all of these matters in the national interest. Well, it's not so secret now because it's all over the Observer newspaper and there are about three or four pages within it, and it is well worth reading. Just as a reminder of how tricky those rules can be if you breach them, the United Kingdom recently had to pay the European Union £2.3 billion in relation to a disagreement over the importation of Chinese textiles and footwear between 2011 and 2017, when, of course, we were still a part of the European Union. That was then, this is now. Post-referendum, and of course we are out. Plus, the Minister for the government's newly created Science and Technology Department has signalled that the United Kingdom is ready to go it alone if the European Union does not agree to Britain's post-Brexit terms of membership. I'll be speaking to many guests today, but we also want to hear from you. You can email me, as always, at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can get in touch via any of our social media outlets. So let's hear from you and we'll share back the best as the programme progresses. Let's begin to chew this over with a couple of friends from both sides of the debate. First, political commentator and former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib, and Dennis McShane, the former Minister of State for Europe and Member of Parliament for Rotherham. And I'm going to start with Ben. Did you hear any of the comings and goings in the House of Lords?
I haven't followed it blow by blow. No, I haven't.
It's great.
But, I mean, I think listening to what you just said, you know, there are basically two grappling hooks into the British carcass, if you like, as part of the leaving deal that we did. The first grappling hook is the Northern Ireland Protocol, which actually prevents the United Kingdom from leaving the EU as one United Kingdom. And then the other grappling hook are the terms of the level playing field in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which requires us to align on state aid, employment, competition and environmental law. And with these two grappling hooks, the EU is holding the United Kingdom close, preventing us from being able to actually properly Brexit. So when these people gather wherever it is they're gathering for Finchley Park, for their secret talks to put what they describe as a failing Brexit right. What they need to first recognise is that we haven't actually got Brexit. You cannot judge Brexit until it's been delivered and divergence has been given an opportunity to manifest itself. We still have all the European Union laws on our books. We're fearful of diverging because of the Irish Sea border that's created by the protocol, fear of upsetting the EU, and prevented in large part by the level playing field that I described. So we haven't got Brexit, and before we turn our backs on it, it ought to be given a chance to work. That's what we voted for. The little slip in 2016 said Do you wish the United Kingdom to leave the European Union? We haven't left the EU yet.
Dennis, are you more optimistic about what the Observer are reporting today when you've got the likes of David Lammy and Michael Gove sitting around a table and discussing what needs to be done to get this process, whether you agree with it or not, get it moving?
I'm also more optimistic by the fact that King Charles is going on a huge state visit to France, I think, next month. He's just announced he'll be addressing the Bundestag in Berlin later this year. Frankly, the King is doing far more than any of his ministers or shadow ministers in keeping a relationship between our country and our continent alive. Those who want this complete and utter rupture and just don't understand a single thing about British, English, Scottish, Irish history for the last 1,000 years. That story's fascinating. It's also in the Sunday Times, slightly downplayed. The Observer put it on the front page and the Sunday Times inside. Basically, Michael Gove is there, authorised by Rishi Sunak, to say Brexit isn't working. Now, that's an incredible statement from a party that's utterly wedded to giving us Brexit, campaigning for Brexit, getting Brexit done, to use Boris Johnson's phrase. And here they are now, gently hauling up the white flag. It is of huge symbolic significance.
It's because they haven't delivered it, Dennis. It's because we haven't taken advantage of any of the potential Brexit freedoms that were on offer. You know, the whole point of Brexit was to take back control. That was the three-word, mantra that they used to get it across, to get the vote across the line. But we haven't. We're completely aligned with the EU. We haven't diverged one bit. We've got to become that Singapore-on-Thames that so many of us wish to be. Ditch all that bureaucracy. Get rid of these laws. You know, I've heard it said in the House of Lords that we're not getting rid of the laws for fear of the vacuum it creates. Well, they singularly fail to understand the British legal setup. The whole point about the way we operate in this country, common law, is that everything is permitted unless it's expressly prohibited. And laws are not there to guide us like they are in the EU. Laws in the United Kingdom are made to prevent us from doing things. Otherwise, everything should be permitted. They should just ditch all of those laws and let people go back to the way we were before we joined the European Union. There will not be a vacuum.
One of the questions that Michael Dobbs asked in that debate was, why would you want to retain any of these legislative devices?
Why would you?
If we're not in any way. I mean, it's a little bit like Ben's grappling hooks, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I worked a lot in Singapore. Singapore is the most regulated, controlled, civil service-run little country in the world. More industry, more trade unions. The General Secretary of the Singapore TUC at the time sitting in the cabinet. Can you imagine that in Britain? Housing, land all belonging to the state sitting on the boards of companies. I mean... No, sorry, Ben.
But there's no...
But if you go back to Michael Dobbs'
as you know,
point,
because we talked about it...
Yeah.
We did some polling recently here at GBNews for Camilla Tominey's programme, and it demonstrated that the majority of people out there don't particularly feel any better off. But there was virtually zero appetite to rerun the argument and rerun the referendum.
Exactly. And Ben keeps, and I've been here, I like him very much, he hasn't escaped from 2016. Now, what I think Gove was authorised to do by the Prime Minister was to open the escape hatch and say, what kind of relationship can we have with Europe? We've accepted Brexit. That's in the past.
But we haven't got it yet.
I love Michael.
Dennis.
Well, we haven't got it. We haven't got perfect love. Rotherham United never won the Premier League.
About which I complain. It is about the fundamental aspect of taking back control.
Okay.
We had a Supreme Court ruling last week. I don't know if you followed this, Alastair, but it was a case that I brought with a number of other unionists against the protocol. The Supreme Court ruled that the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is a fundamental aspect of the deal that Boris Johnson did, breaks the Acts of Union. It also breaks the East-West dimension of the Good Friday Agreement, and it steps over the principle of consent, which is a cornerstone of that agreement. We have got constitutional... massive constitutional self-harm being perpetrated by that deal. And the only way to put it right is to get a proper Brexit, to ditch the protocol and to take Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom, restore it to its rightful place in the UK, and for us to leave the EU. We have not left. The Supreme Court came to that conclusion last week, Dennis.
Well, Ben, you know more than all the Supreme Court justices.
I didn't. I'm saying the Supreme Court agreed that we haven't left.
No, I mean, Arlene
to be crystal clear, because people sitting at home, either watching on television or listening on radio, I'm sure, will be thinking, but we have left the European Union. That's what we voted for. We are no longer members of it, even if there are 400 pieces of law on our statute book that are the rules of engagement, assuming that we were still there. What you're really describing is exactly what Dennis said a moment ago, and that is get in there, engage, which is what this gathering of the great and the good at Ditchley Park was about. How do you actually make it work?
Well, as I said, the best thing about British legal system is actually everything's permitted unless it's expressly prohibited. And so we should just ditch these laws. But Sunak doesn't have the courage to do it because Sunak fears the EU. Half the Conservative Parliamentary Party, probably more than half the Conservative Parliamentary Party, fears the EU. They fear treading independently for the economic ramifications that the EU would wrought on the UK. But what kind of...
Have you seen the Telegraph leader today?
I did.
Stop blaming our economic malaise on Brexit. It's energy. Just look at what's happening in Spain. It's across the piece.
OK, now that's really interesting.
Well, very simply, I mean, Ben reminds me so much. And actually, Ben, you even look a little like my very old friend, Alastair's very old friend, Tony Benn. He used to sit there. Tony Benn. He used some older viewers will know who he is. He used to sit there saying, we just have to leave. We just have to refuse all their laws. And then Britain will be great again. Everybody will come and invest here. Nobody's coming to invest here precisely because we can't trade with our biggest partners. So that's, I'm saying, I'm very happy to sit debating 2016 with you and with anybody forever. But sooner or later, and I think it'll begin to accelerate a little bit, only a little bit.
Dennis and Ben, for the time being, thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted to say that that we have other guests waiting in the wings to join our conversation, and we still very much want to hear from you. There's one of them, my old chum, Norman Baker, who is not a former Europe minister, but a former Home Office minister, and that was in the days of the Liberal Democrat and Conservative coalition. So let's start with the parliamentary process. No excuses for filibusters, which was in effect what was going on in the House of Lords. Ben says just take a deep breath and get on with it. And Dennis says there needs to be a greater clarity in what we really want. Get that on the table, get there and get the negotiations going again. What's your view, Norman?
Well, I mean, look, Alastair, I could spend about 15 minutes dealing with the points just raised, but no doubt you won't let me do that. But these 400 laws that apparently the government wants to ditch, some of them were created by us. They were ones which we, as a nation, argued for within the European Union because we thought it was in the interest of ourselves and the European Union to have these laws on the statute book. They're not imposed on us as if we were standing by doing nothing. We helped create those laws. And some of those laws relate to environmental protection, which we don't want to see ditched. They relate to workers' rights we don't want to see ditched. They are essential laws in many cases. We have the ability to get rid of individual laws if we don't like them, but to get rid of the whole lot when we've helped create them, and in fact they protect the environment and workers' rights, it's just bonkers, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, I want to pick up on Ben's point that he says that Brexit hasn't been delivered. You know, when people voted in 2016, there were variations of Brexit put forward. Many people who voted for Brexit, there was a very narrow majority, let's remember, 52-48. Many people who voted for Brexit thought we were voting for a softer Brexit, one where we stayed in the single market and the customs union. And what Ben's arguing for, he's not to argue for it, is the hardest possible Brexit. That wasn't where the majority of people were. Let's remember that the European Union was partly created by a Conservative Winston Churchill, and the single market was championed by the Conservative Margaret Thatcher. Nobody wanted this ultra-hard Brexit apart from a few people on the far right. Now, the fact is, this meeting we saw about in the report in the Observer yesterday, that meeting of Conservative and Labour politicians, both from Leave and Remain supporting politicians, is a recognition that Brexit hasn't worked. We've got a 4% reduction in GDP. We've got a 15% reduction in trade. We've cut off relations with our closest neighbours.
So, Ben,
this is an attempt to say, what do we do about the situation?
You were critical a moment ago. He heard you do it of the Johnson deal. You want the hardest possible Brexit. You want to redo it.
1 in 5 who voted for leave now regret that decision.
It's not a matter of a hard Brexit. It's not a far-right policy, by the way. There are lots of people right across the Labour heartlands who wanted Brexit. It's about delivering the control back to our own government, to take control away from the EU. You mentioned energy policy being cited in the lead of the Telegraph this morning. We can't take back control of our energy policy because of the level playing field that we're hooked into. We can't ditch net zero, for example, if we wish, because the trade and cooperation agreement requires us not to ditch it. There's provisions on pages 201 and 202 of the TCA if you want to look them up. It's not a matter of a hard right, hardest possible Brexit. It's a matter of delivering Brexit. And just to remind everyone, when we voted for it, we voted for the United Kingdom to leave the EU. Last week, the Supreme Court judged that part of the United Kingdom is, in effect, left behind in the EU. We have not, by definition, got Brexit.
Well, that's so Norman, not the hardest, but one that actually works and gives us control of the things that we want to control. And I apologise, I spoke over you a little earlier. I wanted to get Ben's reaction to what you were saying.
I mean, in the world these days, you have to have relations with other countries, whether it's the European Union or America or anything else. And you could equally argue, Ben, that we haven't got control of ourselves because we're in NATO. We're subject to rules in NATO, which we agree to with the Americans and so on. And your definition of Brexit is one that is not shared by all people who voted for Brexit. Some people who voted for Brexit want to stay in the single market. That's
but you can't escape the question on the ballot paper.
One of the issues which I want to pick up on is on the issue which GBNews viewers feel very strongly about, which is the issue of small boats in the Channel and the number of people coming across. Under the Dublin Convention, which we were party to as part of the European Union, we were able, under the Dublin Convention, to ask safe countries in the EU to take back migrants who pass through those countries. We can't do that now because we've
Norman, I'm going to give Ben the right of reply there, as I did to you. Ben?
Well, the Dublin Convention is a complete red herring. Over a 4-year period, something like 36 people were repatriated pursuant to the Dublin Convention. It's completely irrelevant to our inability to control the illegal flow of migrants across the Channel. And by the way, also, the European Court of Justice is irrelevant, as is the Convention of Human Rights. What they constrain us on is the ability to deport people once they've crossed the Channel. Actually, the government has all the laws it needs to prevent these people from entering British territorial waters in the first place. The UN Convention on Laws of the Sea give the government the right to stop people illegally entering British territorial waters. They just don't exercise that right.
Dennis McShane, quick final word from you, sir.
Like Norman, unfortunately, Ben, I was a minister. I got a call when I was minister, because I was in charge of Brazil, from David Blunkett, saying I've got a plane load of illegal Brazilian overstayers, illegal immigrants down in Wiltshire, ready to fly to Brazil, but they won't let them in. Can you sort it out? So I called up the Brazilian foreign minister, who's a friend. He said, we know about this. We heartily disapprove of Brazilians going to the UK.
I love these conversations that conclude with something that I think all of us are agreed on, and that is just get it done.
Get it
sorted out.
And he said, we are not going
Dennis
to allow
McShane,
you
Norman Baker,
to humiliate...
Thank you all very much indeed. And you've been quoted by Norman Baker out there. The great GB News listeners and viewers, do let us know what you think, rather than leave it to any of my guests to tell you what they think you think. Let's hear from you, and then we'll share some of the better thoughts a little later on. But for the time being, Ben, Dennis and Norman, thank you all very much indeed. You are watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and friends. Hurrah, hurrah. With lots more coming up on the programme today, including the very latest on the cross-party committee findings on the BBC's chairman, Richard Sharp. We'll be catching up with our political reporter next. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Hello, I'm Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Now, looking ahead to the start of the new week, and it'll be dry for many with some frost and fog. Though looking across the north, the breeze will start to pick up as these weather fronts start to make a little bit of eastwards progress towards that high. And it will also bring a few outbreaks of rain as we head into the new working week. But back to this evening and overnight, and with some clear spells around for northern and western areas, we could just see a few patches of mist and fog forming. Be mostly cloudy elsewhere, though we might start to see a few clear spells developing in the far southeast towards the early hours that could just bring a few patches of fog. Be a mostly mild night with all that cloud around, but there could just be a patch of rural frost for northern and eastern areas. So a cloudy start to start the new week, though as we head through the day on Monday, that cloud will start to lift and break and will bring some sunny spells, particularly as we head into the late morning and the early part of the afternoon. Temperatures will be once again above average for the time of year, with highs of 10 to 12 across the south. Now, as we go ahead into Monday evening and overnight, with a few more in the way of clear spells, there's a greater risk of frost and fog. The greatest chance of seeing fog will be across the southeast, so we've got the lightest winds through Monday night. Though there'll be some cloud moving into the west, bringing some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle and a stronger breeze too, so a milder night here. Though with those clear spells, a cooler night in the east and a chance of seeing a patchy rural frost. So into Tuesday, we've got that cloud moving in from the west, bringing some outbreaks of rain and drizzle to the far north and west, with the best chance of any sunny spells in the south and east. Looking through the rest of the week, it'll be generally settled for many, with a few outbreaks of rain towards midweek and temperatures above average.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 1:30, here's the latest. A man has been charged in connection with disarray outside a hotel housing asylum seekers in Knowsley on Friday night. 19-year-old Jared Skeet from Liverpool has been charged with violent disorder and assault by beating of an emergency worker. He'll appear at Wirral Adult Remand Court tomorrow. Merseyside police say the violence, when the fireworks were thrown at officers and a police van set alight, left one officer and 2 members of the public injured. 14 other people have been released on bail. The Labour Party is urging the BBC chairman to consider his position after MPs found that he'd breached standards when applying for the role. The cross-party committee says that Richard Sharp made significant errors of judgment when he failed to declare that he'd helped Boris Johnson to secure a loan when he was Prime Minister. Turkey has ordered the detention of 113 suspects in connection with the construction of buildings that collapsed in Monday's earthquakes. It comes as the death toll in Turkey and Syria rose to more than 28,000. Some rescue operations have been halted in Turkey after reports of looting, whilst hundreds of thousands of people have been made homeless in the middle of winter. Workers at Heathrow Airport are to vote on whether to stage fresh strikes after rejecting their latest pay offer. Unite says over 3,000 of its members, including security guards and engineers, will begin the month-long ballot on the 17th of February. The union says the offered 10% salary increase amounts to a pay cut when compared to the rate of inflation. And a second unidentified flying object has been shot down by the US military, this time over Canada. Canadian forces will now recover and analyse the wreckage of the cylindrical object. It's believed to be similar to the Chinese surveillance balloon, which was shot down off the coast of the US around a week ago.
They just shot it.
On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Alastair.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. So now let's take a look at the political agenda with our GB News political reporter, Olivia Utley. As we just heard in Ray's news bulletin, today the media is awash with the findings from the cross-party committee that says Richard Sharp, the BBC chairman, made significant errors when he failed to declare his role in helping to secure a loan from the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So reverberations, this is the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, I think chaired by Damien Green, but cross-party, obviously Labour voices, Tory voices, SNP voices there for sure. Is it more problems, as I suggested on this programme way back when, for Richard Sharp than it is for Boris Johnson?
It's very awkward indeed for Richard Sharp. It's more eviscerating, this report from the DCMS committee, chaired, as you say, by Damien Green, than we were expecting it to be. Just a quick quote here from Damien. He says that such significant error of judgment meant we were not in full possession of the facts when we were required to rule on his suitability for the role of BBC chair. So essentially, he's saying that the Parliament couldn't have known that he was sort of the wrong person for the job. Now, Richard Sharp has hit back quite firmly. His defence is that he told Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary at the time, he briefed him that he was applying for the role, and that means that it was agreed with Simon Case that there were no problems were raised at the time. So that is his defence now. The government hasn't exactly sprung to Richard Sharp's aid. On the media round this morning, Andrew Mitchell heaped praise on the DCMS committee that has come back with this really quite sharp report. So now Richard Sharp's position is looking pretty tricky. As for Boris Johnson, it doesn't seem to be getting him into too much more deep water for now. All of the questions really seem to be directed at Richard Sharp and whether or not the briefing that he gave to Simon Case into the fact that he was applying for the role was enough of a defence, or whether he is going to have to stand down.
Interestingly, it's not as dramatic or as powerful as the committee hearings in Washington, D.C., as they say, on the Hill. But the Select Committee did hear from him and, in effect, nodded through the appointment first time out. This is a retake of it, so we shall watch that one because clearly it has not gone away. As you know, we're talking about why there's a delay in getting European Union law off the statute book. And you, I know, will have seen the Observer piece about the Ditchley Park gathering, which allows them to put Michael Gove and David Lammy together on the front page of the Observer. But it talks about other Tory grandees having attended that meeting. Is there a sense at the top of the Conservative Party, and therefore by definition the government, that Brexit really is unfinished business, and that they need to get their digits out and really start delivering some goodies for the great electorate, or there's going to be enormous disappointment come the May elections and indeed ultimately the general election?
Yes, there certainly is, and that meeting, which has been reported widely across the Sunday papers today in Ditchley Park, there's a very blunt quote coming out of it, essentially saying that, I don't have it to my fingertips, but that Brexit hasn't delivered the dividends that were promised. What we can expect to see now is Rishi Sunak. We know that there are movements on the Northern Ireland Protocol, and what we're expecting to see in upcoming weeks is Rishi Sunak perhaps coming down, stepping down on some of the stronger stances that he's taken on the Northern Ireland Protocol, in the hope that Britain and its European neighbours can come to a closer arrangement. But of course, that will upset many in the Conservative Party, on the right of the Conservative Party, and of course many DUP MPs who've resisted the Northern Ireland Protocol very strongly from the beginning.
Indeed so. We had fascinating conversation on that a couple of weeks ago as well, with the leader of the Conservatives in Northern Ireland saying that he thought there was every prospect that a deal would be done on the protocol, and that it would not be long off. So fingers crossed on that for the good people of Northern Ireland. But you're absolutely right about the DUP's position. And then if it is done, then they may even get an assembly as well back working. All things are possible. Olivia Utley there, GB News political correspondent. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on Richard Sharp and on Brexit. Keep in touch, and we'll talk to you again later on. You're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including our Rural Spotlight, which this week we focus on what government is or is not doing for that vital and essential industry here across the United Kingdom. But before all of that, we're going to take a quick break.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app, and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio and online. We're talking about the European Union and a whole range of other stuff. And once again, you've been getting in touch, particularly on our earlier discussion about Brexit and the EU. Here are just a few of your thoughts. Nicholas starts us underway. The binary choice was remain in the EU or leave the EU. And Westminster, in its hissy fit, created a hybrid monster called Brexit. Peter says the establishment will never forgive the population for voting for Brexit and will do what is necessary to seek to reverse the decision. Interesting point. I don't think they're going to seek to reverse the decision. I think they are doing everything within their power, perhaps, to negate the decision, which is what we were talking about earlier on with Ben and Dennis and Norman. Michael says the Brexiteers know that since leaving, we have been lied to since the day we voted to leave the European Union. Mrs May onwards. No one in charge of the Conservative Party has made any effort to get Brexit done. As a lifelong Conservative voter, I am voting Reform next time out to get this job done. Thank you very much, Lee, for that. Keep all of your views coming in, and we will find time before we go off air to share some more of them back with you to add to the greater understanding of what people out there really think about the European Union and the whole Brexit process. Time now, I'm delighted to say, for our Rural Spotlight, where we highlight the stories that are affecting those away from the busy city streets, those in our rural communities. And this week I have asked one of our regular farmers to discuss the issues affecting him most of all at the moment, and whether he and his industry feel well represented by our current government. Now, put my cards on the table. I attended a lunch recently with some Hampshire farmers, and they said to me their core concern was that ministers really need to focus more on whether they want a sector, agriculture, that is supporting their green agenda, or an industry that is seeking to feed us, reduce imports, reduce carbon emissions from transportation, and all the rest of it. And a number of the farmers around that table in Hampshire made it crystal clear to me that what the message from government was, whatever it wasn't crystal clear. So joining me now is, as I said, one of our regular farmers. It's Gareth Wyn-Jones, who's a Welsh arable farmer. Is the message in Wales any clearer to you? Are you there to create food, feed the nation, or are you there to support the green agenda?
Well, hopefully it's going to be a little bit of everything, to be honest with you, Alastair, and pound that. Yeah, we're devolved in Wales, you know, on the side of agriculture, which is good. You know, we can have our powers, but there's a lot of challenging things where we're seeing, you know, farms being taken over, especially to be planted trees on. And if anybody understands, you know, they're not going to resonate any carbon catchment for about 10 years. So, you know, I think sometimes we have to look at the bigger picture, and if we want to produce food in affordable, sustainable and regenerative way, we have to build a better Britain on our bellies, and this needs a farming food revolution, and it needs everybody to come together. And I don't think government in Westminster or down in the Bay in Cardiff here doing the job right. We need hubs, you know, we need hubs, and we need people that are the best at their jobs, from dairy farmers, pig producers, arable, milking boys. We need them all to come together and put these ideas on the table. We need to be doing this ASAP.
Is the principal problem that they don't know what they want, whether they are there in Cardiff or in the Senedd or in the Welsh Government or in Westminster, or that they know what they want but they don't communicate it with you people very well?
Yes, yeah. And do you know what? It's been difficult for farmers. We're at the coalface and we're blamed for everything. You turn on any television and, you know, climate change, and they'll be blaming farmers, you know, cows farting, methane, whatever they want to call it. And I think we're part of the solution, not the problem.
Yes,
but we need to work together. And Yeah, and I believe, that trees and hedges are great, but the right tree in the right place and planting hedgerows are fantastic, for wildlife, for birds, and the cover for livestock. They're where the grants should be going. And these corridors would be, sequencing carbon very, very quickly. And nobody seems to realise that the majority of our grassland is sequencing a lot more carbon than our trees, when they're planted, of course. And if you look at where we are here on the Carnarvon mountain range, my family's been here 375 years. This place is a haven for wildlife, flora and fauna, because, my family, my forefathers understood how to produce food in a sustainable way, or we wouldn't be here. And soil fertility as well, Alastair. We need these directions from government. If we look back at what's happened through, joining Europe, where the grant schemes came in, they paid everybody to rip out hedges, drain the land, and then, headage payment came for sheep. Too many sheep are on the mountains then because you were getting paid per head. All these problems are government related. They've come from policies. They're the ones destroying the countryside, not the farmers. We want to be producing food affordably, sustainably, regeneratively, and we all need to do this together. Doesn't matter, if you're in Scotland, Ireland, Wales, or England. It has to be joint thinking, and the supermarkets have got a big role to play in this. The supermarkets need to be paying a fair price for what we're producing.
Sure.
And this all needs to be looked at by government. It's not fair to be pointing the finger of blame at farmers, because as I said before, we are part of the solution, not the problem.
Is it commercially feeling any more comfortable, Gareth, than we last time we spoke, with the cost of power and the cost of fertilisers and getting produce to market? You mentioned supermarkets there, but obviously there are many other outlets as well. Is it feeling commercially at all easier at the moment?
Yeah, fertilisers come down a little bit, but, energy costs, it's the same for us. But if you look at the majority of farmers that are producing and selling to supermarket, they're only getting 1% of the profit. And they're just taking, the PISS, they're taking the cream out of everything that the farmer's doing. Some of these egg producers have been producing eggs at a loss so they can, put them on supermarket shelves. It's not right, Alastair. We have to address it. And I think we've got some of the most, best farming practices in the world in this country, and some of the best farmers in the world. And this is what we need to sit down with government and have these discussions. But nobody seems to be listening. From the tops of Scotland to the bottom of Norfolk, everybody's scratching their heads, and nobody in the farming community gets
Gareth,
that opportunity.
I cannot tell you how much I agree with pretty well all of what you just said there, but I'm particularly pleased as well to hear you say that things at the moment are getting a little bit better. I don't think there's anyone who's better at protecting the rural landscape and the countryside and the environment than farmers just getting on with their job and doing it. And we wish you well. Thank you for joining us again. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Gareth Wyn-Jones there, arable farmer from Welsh Wales. Take care and talk to you again soon, I hope very much. Now, I could have asked him about the next subject, but I chose not to, because sitting next to me is a very good friend of mine who is the expert in the field. It is the Six Nations rugby tournament, and it is well underway. Now, Scotland, my eldest son, tells me in very considerable detail, has played an absolute blinder so far, beating Wales. Maybe that's why I didn't mention it to my last guest there, but 35-7. And England, of course, take on Italy later today. Can Mr. Borthwick's side take it in their stride and get back to their winning ways? Well, we shall see. Well, sitting next to me here in the studio, I'm delighted to give us his take, is sports journalist and broadcaster Aidan McGee. The sport supplements got some great writing today about all of this, but it's pretty clear. Sunday Times touch of luck, controversy in Dublin as a wonder leap helps Ireland to victory over France. and the Observer number one and done. I mean, the only thing that they disagree on is whether Ireland is going to come out at the other end as overall winners or Scotland.
Well, look, I mean, you'd place France...
You say Scotland, and then Alexander Stewart will be very happy bunny.
Well, I'll say this for them. I mean, they've won their first 2 matches in the Six Nations. That's never happened before. So...
having some spectacular individual performances.
Well, without doubt. I mean, and also last week against England, England just left. England didn't play badly in that game. They were at home as well. They've got a real good run of form against England at the moment as well, which they haven't always had since 1990, certainly. But England left the door slightly open, and what really elite sides do is that they charge through it, and that's exactly what Scotland did yesterday. They were ruthless, similarly, against Wales yesterday. But the key game yesterday, the standout game, as you mentioned just then, at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. Ireland went into that as the world number one, but there's a saying in sport, what's number one worth if number two's better? Everyone thinks France, as the Six Nations champions, they're finally coming of age. They're favourites to win this tournament, at least they were until yesterday. They're looking good for the World Cup later in the year. It does feel like their times. Ireland had a psychological issue
and
playing
some blasts from the past back in that Irish side, which they love in Dublin.
They do. I mean, it's the genesis of it, or the nucleus of it, I should say, is the team. Is the Leinster team, who are sweeping all before them at the moment. But excellent performances yesterday from James Lowe, that contortionist try, which was controversial. He did seem to get it over the line. Gary Ringrose, similarly, outstanding as well. Shades of Brian O'Driscoll there back in the day. However, Ireland had a psychological issue, as they've had in major tournaments in the last 10 years or so. They've always had the talent, but they haven't been able to carry it over the line, literally. They'd lost their last three matches against France. France had won 14 in a row, including being the last side to win in Dublin. What was crucial there, though, in terms of dynamics, was the fact that there was no crowd there last time. 51,700 literally carried them over the line yesterday, if you pardon that awful pun. And I would say they're in the box seat, along with Scotland now, to win that tournament. As we look at England, Steve Borthwick, new coach, he made a statement, a mission, when he took out Manu Tuilagi, who'd been, a mainstay of the Eddie Jones era, really, over the past 7, 8 years. But I think sometimes a coach comes in, they like to make a statement to establish their authority. He gave that axis of Owen Farrell, Marcus Smith in the middle there a chance to prove what they could do last week against Scotland. He wasn't happy, clearly, because he's broken up that axis. If you remember in football 12, 15 years ago, we always used to ask, why can't Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard play together? Two outstanding sides, Champions League medals between them, England caps, etc., but they can't get it right together. It's a similar thing with England right now. Those two just can't find that chemistry. Someone had to be sacrificed for that. That was Smith. He kept the captain. I expect them to win against Italy this afternoon, but I don't expect them to go on and make any waves in this tournament. The best they can hope for under a new coach. And given that we're not used to that cult in rugby union of the coach coming in and making an impact straight away, it's not like football. It's more strategic. It takes longer to exercise your game plan.
And to be fair, across the piece, there's been chopping and changing at coach level.
Yeah, there has. I mean, Wales brought back Warren Gatland, but I still think Wales, given that they've lost their first 2 games, I still think they're going to spring a surprise. I still think that they'll finish above Italy. Italy, again, last week gave an outstanding account of themselves against France. So it's a really interesting tournament. I think if Ireland go and do it, they've won Six Nations before. It's whether they can keep that momentum and they can keep their nerve. They're almost like the England of football.
Great sport, no doubt at all about it. Wonderful to watch. Aidan, great to see you. Thank you very much.
You too, Alastair. Nice to see you.
Coming in and sharing your thoughts upon that. And as I say, genuinely, if you're interested, those supplements in the Observer, Sunday Times, and indeed the Telegraph, some great writing about sport there. So dig it out and you'll enjoy it. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with more to come on the programme this afternoon, including discussing who has what it takes to win the next general election. Is it in the bag for Labour, or can the Tories recover? From a piece that we read during the week saying, is this the last Conservative government? Well, that's been said before about all sorts of parties. We'll be discussing that with my very good friend, the eminent grise of polling, David Cowling, a little bit later on. But first, we're going to bring you up to date with the all-important weekend weather.
Hello, I'm Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Now, looking ahead to the start of the new week, and it'll be dry for many with some frost and fog. Though looking across the north, the breeze will start to pick up as these weather fronts start to make a little bit of eastwards progress towards that high. And it will also bring a few outbreaks of rain as we head into the new working week. But back to this evening and overnight, and with some clear spells around for northern and western areas, we could just see a few patches of mist and fog forming. Be mostly cloudy elsewhere, though we might start to see a few clear spells developing in the far southeast towards the early hours that could just bring a few patches of fog. Be a mostly mild night with all that cloud around, but there could just be a patch of rural frost for northern and eastern areas. So a cloudy start to start the new week, though as we head through the day on Monday, that cloud will start to lift and break and will bring some sunny spells, particularly as we head into the late morning and the early part of the afternoon. Temperatures will be once again above average for the time of year, with highs of 10 to 12 across the south. Now, as we go ahead into Monday evening and overnight, with a few more in the way of clear spells, there's a greater risk of frost and fog. The greatest chance of seeing fog will be across the southeast, so we've got the lightest winds through Monday night. Though there'll be some cloud moving into the west, bringing some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle and a stronger breeze too, so a milder night here. Though with those clear spells, a cooler night in the east and a chance of seeing a patchy rural frost. So into Tuesday, we've got that cloud moving in from the west, bringing some outbreaks of rain and drizzle to the far north and west, with the best chance of any sunny spells in the south and east. Looking through the rest of the week, it'll be generally settled for many, with a few outbreaks of rain towards midweek and temperatures above average.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you've just joined us, I am Alastair Stewart, and we are into the final hour of our programme today. Thank you very much indeed if you have been with us from the outset. I and we will be keeping you company here on TV and radio with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including our next discussion. Are the Conservatives too distracted with their domestic issues going on to reverse the polling situation and retake a lead in the polls to stand a chance of winning the next general election? Tall order, but that's what William Hague told them all at Chequers recently, and it's what their internal polling suggests as well. All of that coming up with a top panel of guests, but first let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alastair. 1 minute past 2, here's the latest. A man has been charged in connection with disarray outside a hotel housing asylum seekers in Knowsley on Friday night. 19-year-old Jared Skeet from Liverpool has been charged with violent disorder and assault by beating of an emergency worker. He'll appear at Wirral Adult Remand Court tomorrow. Merseyside police have said that the violence, where fireworks were thrown at officers and a police van set on fire, left an officer and 2 members of the public injured. 14 other people who were arrested have been released on bail. The Labour Party is urging the BBC chairman to consider his position after MPs found that he'd breached standards when applying for the role. The cross-party committee says Richard Sharp made significant errors of judgment when he failed to declare that he'd helped Boris Johnson to secure a loan when he was Prime Minister. Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell is questioning whether he's still able to uphold trust and independence in the broadcaster.
His damning report, it really is an unprecedented report, means that Mr Sharp's position is increasingly untenable, and he really should now reflect on whether he's able to carry out that very important role as the BBC chair to uphold public trust and independence of the BBC.
Looking abroad, and Turkey has ordered the detention of 113 suspects in connection with the construction of buildings that collapsed in Monday's earthquakes. It comes as the death toll in Turkey and Syria rose to at least 30,000. Some rescue operations have been halted in Turkey after reports of looting, whilst hundreds of thousands of people have been made homeless in the middle of winter. Unal Sekikov is the former Turkish ambassador to the UK. He told us the focus must now be on the survivors.
The search and rescue operations are probably coming to an end because it has been almost a week now. And although yesterday there were some survivors who have been rescued from under the rubble, I think it is probably coming to an end. Now, the most important thing is the sustainability of the survivors and to create the living conditions for them, because it is very difficult. There's still no electricity and no heating.
The chair of the Commons Defence Committee is urging Rishi Sunak to boost defence spending due to threats of a new Cold War. Tory MP Tobias Ellwood told GB News, "We need more money to replace military equipment and deal with aggression from Russia and China." It comes after reports that some NATO allies are concerned about the UK's military readiness.
On a peacetime budget, we've moved into a new era of insecurity. I make it really clear, we're still in denial. Another Cold War has started, not on one front, but on 2 fronts, with Russia and China. And my concern is that Russia and China are now going to coalesce, are now going to merge together, knowing that they can exploit the international rules-based order unless we stand up.
The brother of murdered 2-year-old James Bulger says he'll never forgive the killers 3 decades after the crime. James was snatched from a shopping centre and killed by 2 men, formerly known as John Venables and Robert Thompson. They were aged 10 at the time, in Merseyside in 1993. John Venables is currently behind bars. Michael Fergus says he should stay there to give justice for James. The search for missing mum Nicola Bulley is now into its 17th day as police continue to investigate her disappearance. Today, yellow ribbons with messages of hope were tied to a bridge over the River Wyre near where Miss Bulley was last seen. She disappeared on the 27th of January while walking her dog shortly after dropping her 2 daughters at school. Lancashire police say it's keeping an open mind in its appeal for information. Workers at Heathrow Airport are to vote on whether to stage fresh strikes after rejecting the latest pay offer. Unite says over 3,000 of its members, including security guards and firefighters, will begin the month-long ballot on the 17th of February. The union says that an offered 10% salary increase amounts to a pay cut when compared to the rate of inflation. A second unidentified flying object has been shot down by the US military, this time over Canada. Canadian forces are now making efforts to recover and analyse the wreckage of the cylindrical object. It's believed to be similar to the Chinese surveillance balloon, which was shot down off the coast of the US a week ago. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair, Stewart and friends.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. Every which way, it seems, the Tories are in trouble, still desperate in the opinion polls and those that measure people's voting intentions for that general election as and when it comes. But obviously there are local elections in May before all of that. There was also recently another by-election, and that too was a blow for the Conservative Party in West Lancashire, with Ashley Dalton taking a 10% swing. Some are even pondering if the malaise is terminal. Labour has said, and I quote, that it shows that the Tories have run out of road. So are they too distracted with their domestic issues and internal squabbles to win an election? Are Labour really ready for government? We'll have a look and natter about all of that with Labour voices and Conservative voices, and also, more importantly, my uniquely impartial and very dear friend who I've known for years and years and years, David Cowling, who is good enough to share his wisdom on polling and history and context with us here at GB News. And I'm delighted to say that he is here in the studio with me, as well as Conservative Party approved parliamentary candidate Lewis Feldman, who put himself forward and has passed muster and is sitting here still smiling, I'm delighted to say, despite that introduction. I mean, run out of road's a great line. Does it bear more than scant examination?
Well, if you think that what's set now is going to be true in a year and a half's time, then yes, you can think that. I'm a bit of a sceptic. I mean, events have dominated our politics.
I mean, the party had run out of road in '92, and Neil Kinnock and Labour was supposed to be a slam dunk.
Yes, and there are significant challenges for Labour. I mean, if the polls are correct at the moment, then clearly the Conservatives are not destined to win the next election unless they can shift those polls. And they have 18 months to try and do that. But I think in terms of Labour winning and some of the more extraordinary statements that have been made in recent weeks, not, I have to say, by Starmer, but by other people.
In all of these matters, the brilliant quote that's attributed, I think, if I remember rightly, wrongly to Harold Macmillan, but events dear boy. All sorts of people have laid claim to it, but anyway, it's normally attributed to Supermac. Government have the levers of power as well, not least the spring budget. Once they've decided, I've talked about them being distracted, but once they've decided what they're going to do about taxation, we've talked about that many times here on this programme and at GB News. I mean, these are enormously important powers of influence that any party in government will retain until they lose a general election.
Of course, and I'm sure that Rishi Sunak, when he was at Chequers, must have been tempted to turn to his colleagues and say, I can't take this, I haven't got time for this, namely the distractions that have been turning attention away from the priorities that he wants to highlight, because he sees those as a pathway back to power. So all of these distractions are simply putting that back and endangering the Conservatives' ability to turn the ship round.
Yeah. I mean, presumably you've analysed all of that before putting your name forward to be a candidate. The direction of travel for an awful lot of people that I know, including Deanna Davidson, who used to work with us here at GB News, brilliant woman, who even got a job, was a junior Levelling Up minister, has decided she's not even going to stand again in Bishop Auckland. And I think it was last night or a couple of nights ago, Nadine Dorries said that even she wasn't going to stand. What do you know that they don't?
I want to stand because I still believe in the values and principles of the Conservative Party, and that doesn't change over the short term. I think it's always great fun to look at things like by-elections happening at the moment and extrapolate about what might happen, but we're possibly 2 years away from a general election. It could be in January 2025 at the very latest. That is a very long time in British politics, as we've seen.
You specialise in defence as one of your policy issues and have indeed worked in that sector. I mean, Labour, I know for a fact, having talked to Labour people about it, recognised, and we go back to '92 and our dear friend Neil Kinnock, recognised that Labour's attitude towards NATO and to defence and indeed spending was a real vulnerability for them. And Sir Keir Starmer not least post Jeremy Corbyn, addressed it, and in a set of data I was trawling through recently, Labour are not only increasingly trusted on the economy, but they are for sure trusted now on defence.
Yes. I mean, I think all of this tends, I think, to reflect the fact that the lack of faith, the decline in faith in the Conservative Party. Keir Starmer hasn't frightened the horses. Many critics have said, "Oh, he's too boring." Well, that's what Labour needed, arguably. They didn't. They'd had Jeremy Corbyn, they'd had Ed Miliband. Here, they wanted a steady person whom people could look at and say, "Yes, I could actually see you as Prime Minister," and that's what Labour's been lacking.
Do you agree with Tobias Ellwood in Ray's news bulletin just then, saying this government, the government that you would support if you were successful, needs to spend more on defence? Because both Rishi and Liz said during the leadership campaign that they would increase spending, and the Chief of the Defence Staff and the Head of the Army both have said recently that given our generosity towards Ukraine with tanks and now even considering aircraft, but all sorts of stuff, that we are underfunded. And there's a brilliant article in one of the papers this morning by Francis Chaucer, John Chaucer's son, who's such a brilliant defence analyst, saying that if we were engaged in a struggle now, we probably wouldn't win it.
I think defence spending does need to rise, yeah. Tobias knows what he's talking about on these issues and has been studying them for a very long time. And I think has come to the right conclusions, that we are living in extremely...
So what's the line of defence, David, then, when a brilliant young Labour person says, as Boris Johnson strutted his stuff around the world helping Ukraine and Sunak's tried to echo it all and what have you, this is a party and leadership that has left this country incapable of defending itself, and that's not a Labour attack line. In effect, it's an attack line from the intelligentsia and not contradicted by the Chief of the Defence Staff. Do you have a defence line on that?
Yeah, well, you mentioned kind of how Keir Starmer's changed Labour's position, and you're right that he's moved that a lot from where Jeremy Corbyn was, which I think frightened a lot of people. But Labour just published last week their initial manifesto ideas about defence, and they were frankly still dangerous and naive. They said that the tilt towards the Indo-Pacific, mainly towards supporting allies around China, was wrong. We should come back from that. We should withdraw our aircraft carriers and just focus again on Europe because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, of course. Now, Russia is a clear and present danger today, but China is the pacing threat in the medium term. And for Labour to say...
Did you know, and David, am I right, that in, again, that polling that showed that Labour's increasingly trusted on defence, that support for Ukraine was the only single issue upon which the Conservative Party outpolls Labour at the moment?
Again, not too surprising, I think, given the sort of coverage that there has been and the high profile of Boris Johnson initially and that taken up by Sunak afterwards. So, I mean, that's clearly a plus for a lot of people who sympathise with the struggles of Ukraine. So, in a sense, that doesn't surprise me. The other material surrounding it, in the economy and the rest of it, is troublesome. But that one certainly is a plus for them. As
Bill Clinton was constantly told, it's the economy, stupid. Not to say that Mr. Clinton was stupid, far from that. No. But certainly it is the economy. Could Sir Keir Starmer and Labour overdo the line about don't take anything for granted?
No. I was looking at some of the figures, as you would expect me to. If Labour is to get a majority simply of 2 seats, they need to win 124 seats. Now, the Labour Party's been around for over 100 years. They've only 3 times in that century ever got close or reached 124 gains in one single general election. 1929, 1945, 1997. 97 is the one most obvious to us. And I was looking at the by-elections in the run-up to 97's election, and there were 4 or 5 of them where you had 20% Labour swings to Labour. Barking, Dagenham, Dudley West.
One of our viewers just sent in an email, you may or may not have heard it as you were coming into the studio, saying that they're so honked off with the Conservatives' inability to genuinely deliver on Brexit. And I've seen from many, many GB News viewers and listeners their disquiet over tax policy, that they are seriously considering embracing Reform UK and Richard Tice's party. not showing up sharply or significantly in the polls yet, as UKIP used to during the whole Brexit debate. But when you've got an alternative party, cephalogically, the vulnerability of a ruling party is significant.
Yes, I mean, in some of the polls they're hitting about 7%. In some of the polls they're marginally ahead of the Greens. And for a party that has been below the radar for lots of people, that's not an inconsiderable matter. But in terms of the polling and the by-elections this election, they're running for Labour. And remembering Labour began this period losing a seat to the Conservatives on a 16% swing in Hartlepool. But the more recent ones have been about half the polling swings as prior to 97. And given that Labour has to achieve a bigger swing...
If you're an outsider, you don't have to win to prove your point.
No.
You have to stop the person you're honked off with from winning.
And indeed, it may be that part of the reason why Labour isn't performing as it was is people are still reluctant to vote for them and are flirting with Reform and others. And the question for the Conservatives is, can they draw those back?
Although I don't think many people, Conservative voters, would be looking at Reform for economic issues in particular at the moment. I think you find more historic Conservative voters who care about cultural issues will be starting to look to the Reform Party, whether that is small boats, whether it's wokeism, whether it's some of the other things that they feel...
Lewis Feldman, we wish you well, not in a partisan way, but because we like people who get engaged in their politics to it. The Telegraph called for a fundamental debate within your party to resolve the Rishi versus Liz Truss differences on tax and growth. We talked on the programme yesterday at length about growth. Unless you can get that clear in your minds as a party, traditionally for the Conservative Party, you will remain in choppy water, as my good friend Mr Cowling describes it. Which side are you on?
I believe we need to aim for lower taxes. I make you Chancellor of the
Exchequer and I would say to you, OK, come the spring budget, what would you do about corporation tax?
I would lower it, absolutely, at the moment.
You would cut it?
Yes, I would. I would cut corporation tax.
How would you explain that to the Prime Minister, whose policy it is from when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer?
Yeah, well, it's the Prime Minister's policy.
Rishi, you were wrong, buddy.
Not at all. It's his policy, and he's been very clear, and he was it when he was elected in the Conservative leadership election, to get the public finances back on a level keel. And I agree with that as well. But I think we have to balance that with... It's really hard living in this country economically at the moment. The cost of living is very high, and we're becoming unattractive to businesses. We've just seen the AstraZeneca decision in the last couple of days to move...
Well, there we go. David, wish you well, as I said before, not because... I support any one party or another, and I don't. But I just like people who get engaged in politics and have the guts to put their money where their mouth is. And so keep in touch with us.
Thank you.
And particularly give me a buzz if you're successful and then immediately appointed to the Treasury team.
I will do.
And we will have a further detailed conversation. David, thank you for your friendship over many, many years, and thanks for your contribution today as well. The polling guru, David Cowling there. And, as I said, approved parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party, Lewis Feldman. Now, adding to the Conservative, I'm delighted to say, is another old friend of mine, Stephen Pound, former Labour Member of Parliament for Ealing North, and there he is. And always good to see you, my friend. David Cowling, who you know, just said in response to my question that he doesn't think Sir Keir and Labour can or should overdo the don't take anything for granted line. What's your view?
Well, that's absolutely correct. Look, the reality of the situation is you've just had beautifully spelt out in pure psephological and mathematical terms the mountain that Labour has to climb. And when you think about the recent by-elections, the 4 recent by-elections, well, Labour may have come first. They didn't win the last 4 by-elections. They only won 1 of them. We held the other 3. But look, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to feel a smidgen of sympathy for Rishi. You think of the old line about when troubles come, they come not as single spies, but in battalions. I mean, the last thing he wants now is a debate about capital punishment. He wants a debate about Lee Anderson. He's got huge issues in Ireland with the border. He's got huge issues about the whole general structure of our relationship with Europe. But looming over all this, and you are so right, Alastair, to hit on the James Carville quotation about the economy. And you've been reading what's been happening in America this week. I mean, I have to say it was a slightly scary headline when I saw in one of the American papers, Biden promises $320 million to the IRA. But in fact, this is the sort of Inflation Reduction Act, which is providing a massive, massive boost to the American economy. And it's a very, very good thing from their point of view. It's a very bad thing from our point of view, because just as we're seeing AstraZeneca go to Ireland, we're going to see more and more businesses going to America, which has now had this huge amount of stimulus. So Labour, I still feel in my waters, this is like that feeling that we had in 1979 when we knew the plates were shifting, and in 97 when we knew that whatever the Tories did, they were going to lose. And also I was there very much in the belly of the beast in 2010 when we sat around waiting for the Etonians because we knew, their top hats were coming up over the horizon. So I think the plates are shifting. I think Labour can win. I think Labour certainly should win, but easy? Absolutely not. This is not a slam dunk. It is damned hard work. And fortunately, we've got a few people on the Labour benches who actually are no strangers to heavy lifting.
What we have seen recently, and we didn't see it for quite a long time, was some people on that front bench team who are willing to tell us in a little more detail of what your party would do were it returned to government. And I'm thinking of Wes Streeting on the NHS, and he and Keir both saying, unless the NHS reforms, it will die. It is unsustainable as it's currently structured. That's quite a gutsy thing for a Labour spokesperson to say about the NHS. Normally the line for so long was that NHS is not safe in Tory hands, they'll flog it off, which was clearly you know as well as I do, a nonsensical line. But gutsy for Streeting to talk about reforming it.
Yeah, very interesting, because it used to be said that the British are not a religious people, so they invented the NHS to give them a state religion. It has been a shibboleth. It's been the untouchable. It's been the third rail of politics. It's the one you touch at your peril, which is, I think, that the statement by Wes Streeting, who wasn't massively widely known before he made this, is one of the most significant statements made about the National Health Service, certainly right back to Nye Bevan, and to the Gillibo report and the early days of it. But there are policies coming up, particularly about windfall taxes on the utilities, about actually hopefully bringing some major utilities back into public ownership, and of course the constitutional ones on the House of Lords, which is dear Lord, the number of times you must have refused a seat in the House of Lords. Sure. I don't know how you'll feel about saying goodbye to the vermin.
Stephen, a candid answer as you always offer. Do even you get a little bit bored with the Labour front bench and the Treasury team having non-dom status as the answer to virtually every spending commitment?
Well, that would be the answer to about 0.005% of the spending commitment. So a very, very small amount. Similarly, VAT on commercial education, private schools would be a fairly small one. But they're compared to the massive, massive amounts, A, of tax avoidance, and B, of completely wasted expenditure at the present time. Propping up, why should French utility companies be filling their boots with our money, and at the same time we're paying for the privilege of buying their electricity? It's insane. Why on earth we sold off our utilities in this way is utterly ludicrous, not just for an emotional or a nationalistic or a sort of chauvinistic thing, but sheer cold economics. We want more money to spend in this country, but above all, Alastair, we want to spend it better. We want to spend it more wisely. We don't want to have another one of those PPE debates. We don't want to have any more Baroness moans. We want to see, stop the people, the people need to actually have value for their money.
Neither she nor the French utility companies are here to defend themselves, so we'll leave that on the table and people will reflect upon it and come to their own conclusions. Stephen, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for breaking into your afternoon and to share those thoughts with us. Stephen Pound, their former Labour Member of Parliament. And we've plenty more still to come on the programme this afternoon. You are watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. After this break, with the death toll in Turkey and Syria now over 28,000 after back-to-back quakes and, of course, a whole series of aftershocks in large parts of Turkey and particularly northern Syria. We will once again be looking at what folk here are seeking to do to try and help and support those poor souls who have survived but lost everything and are desperately in need. That in a couple of minutes' time, but first let's bring you up to date with the weekend weather.
I'm Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Now looking ahead to the start of the new week, and it'll be dry for many with some frost and fog. Though looking across the north, the breeze will start to pick up as these weather fronts start to make a little bit of eastwards progress towards that high. And it will also bring a few outbreaks of rain as we head into the new working week. But back to this evening and overnight, and with some clear spells around for northern and western areas, we could just see a few patches of mist and fog forming. Be mostly cloudy elsewhere, though we might start to see a few clear spells developing in the far southeast towards the early hours that could just bring a few patches of fog. Be a mostly mild night with all that cloud around, but there could just be a patch of rural frost for northern and eastern areas. So a cloudy start to start the new week, though as we head through the day on Monday, that cloud will start to lift and break and will bring some sunny spells, particularly as we head into the late morning and the early part of the afternoon. Temperatures will be once again above average for the time of year, with highs of 10 to 12 across the south. Now, as we go ahead into Monday evening and overnight, with a few more in the way of clear spells, there's a greater risk of frost and fog. The greatest chance of seeing fog will be across the southeast, so we've got the lightest winds through Monday night. Though there'll be some cloud moving into the west, bringing some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle and a stronger breeze too, so a milder night here. Though with those clear spells, a cooler night in the east and a chance of seeing a patchy rural frost. So into Tuesday, we've got that cloud moving in from the west, bringing some outbreaks of rain and drizzle to the far north and west, with the best chance of any sunny spells in the south and east. Looking through the rest of the week, it'll be generally settled for many, with a few outbreaks of rain towards midweek and temperatures above average.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 2:30. I'm Ray Addison with the latest news. The number of people that have died in earthquakes in Turkey and Syria has now risen to more than 33,000. It comes as Turkey has ordered 113 suspects be detained in connection with the construction of buildings that collapsed in the disaster last Monday. Some rescue operations have been halted in the country after reports of looting, whilst hundreds of thousands of people have been made homeless in the middle of winter. A man has been charged in connection with disarray outside a hotel housing asylum seekers in Knowsley on Friday night. 19-year-old Jared Skeet from Liverpool has been charged with violent disorder and assault. He'll appear at Wirral Adult Remand Court tomorrow. Merseyside police say 14 other people have been released on bail. The Labour Party is urging the BBC chairman to consider his position after MPs found that he'd breached standards when applying for the role. A cross-party committee says Richard Sharp made significant errors of judgment when he failed to declare that he'd helped Boris Johnson to secure a loan when he was Prime Minister. The chair of the Commons Defence Committee is urging Rishi Sunak to boost defence spending due to threats of a new Cold War. Tory MP Tobias Ellwood told GB News, "We need more money to replace military equipment and deal with aggression from Russia and China." Comes after reports that some NATO allies are concerned about the UK's military readiness. And workers at Heathrow Airport are set to vote on whether to stage fresh strikes after they rejected the latest pay offer. Unite says over 3,000 of its members, including security guards and engineers, will begin the month-long ballot on the 17th of February. The union says that the offered 10% salary increase amounts to a pay cut when compared to the real rate of inflation. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're listening and watching GB News. Now back to Alastair, Stewart and friends.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. As you just heard in Ray's bulletin, the Turkey-Syrian earthquake death toll has now passed 28,000, and people across the United Kingdom are still doing what they can to help. In North London, for example, a cargo company has been inundated with donations from local communities for those surviving but suffering in Turkey and in Syria. GB News London reporter Lisa Hartle has more on those efforts from good people seeking to help others.
Within 24 hours of the devastating earthquake in Turkey, the community here in North London started working together to gather donations for those in desperate need. After CML Cargo Company in Edmonton put out an appeal for items such as clothes, baby food and blankets, they were inundated not just by donations but offers of help to sort, pack and load.
We are a cargo removal company. We are normally shipping goods of personal effects, like people moving to south coast of Turkey. From the first light of the day, we started getting inquiries about people wanting to donate and send goods to those vulnerable people, and we said, okay, no problem, we're going to ship it for free of charge, and there you go, here we are.
We have been told by the authorities that the main requirements are anything for babies. So we've got the food, we've got the nappies, we've got the wet wipes, dry food, clothing as well, but they're not. Clothing, it is important, but I think the food is more important, and for the kids. Shoes, whatever you can think of. Everyone's been so kind to donate everything and help us pack and help us make this happen, really.
Some of the volunteers have family and friends who live in the areas hit by the earthquake. Some have received word their loved ones are safe, whilst others are still waiting to hear.
All the buildings are down. Most of my relatives are currently outside the house, living in cars, in their cars with their kids and their pregnant wives. Extreme weather conditions, It was my uncle that got stuck with his wife. They were on the top floor, the whole building collapsed down. Luckily, they were on the top floor, so they managed to come out of the roof, and they had to go to hospital, of course.
My second cousins, they have been affected. Luckily, they live in one of the village nearby, and their houses collapsed, but they survived. I've called someone yesterday. They said that they have a village house which has got like a bungalow, a 3-bedroom house. There are over 300 people are living in there at the moment. How can you imagine, like 300 people in small bungalow, but outside is -5. What can you do? It's one of those things.
The cargo company are still taking in donations to drive over to Turkey and say they will continue to help as the humanitarian crisis continues. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Extraordinary scenes there from Turkey and Syria, and the kindness of people in North London and that cargo company quite brilliant. Now, you've also been in touch on our big topics of the day following suggestions that we talked about a few minutes ago, that polling figures are perhaps indicating that this could be the last Conservative government. That's been said before, and it'll be said again, I'm sure. However, this is what you yourselves had to say about it, or a selection of them anyway. Paul gets us underway, and Paul says, is anyone else concerned that both the government and His Majesty's opposition have got their priorities completely wrong, and that this could cost us our lives and our sovereignty? Well, right now, the number one priority, number one priority of our country should be defence. Well, we ran a clip there from Tobias Ellwood, and we did indeed discuss it with one of our guests just a few moments ago. Elizabeth says the Conservatives haven't run out of road. The Remainers have destroyed them because they are numerous enough to have overthrown two Prime Ministers and put in a puppet. The Remainers are happy to hand over to Starmer in the certain belief that he will take us back into the European Union. They are more than happy to destroy the oldest and grandest party just to do that. John chips into our conversation and says people like me, who voted Tory since 2010 and voted Brexit, have nothing to lose right now. If we were to go back voting Labour, nothing has changed. Wages haven't improved, immigration is out of control, and we have lost control of our borders. Highest levels of taxation in 70 years. And finally, Neil says the question was leave or remain, not deal or no deal. All the Labour Party is trying to do is keep all European laws so that they can drag us back into the European Union come 2026. I will not be fooled by these Remainers, and there we are. That's just a selection of the views. Thank you very much indeed for getting in touch. We like to hear all views here on this programme, which is called Alastair, Stewart and Friends. And thank you very much indeed for watching and listening to it here on GB News TV and radio. We've more to come this afternoon, including surprising findings from the consumer group Which this week, who discovered that shopping in smaller versions of our bigger branded supermarkets can cost you £800 more over a full year. But can you save money while still bagging your favourite goods? I'll be finding out with one of our summer savings experts in just a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. Now, my next guest, 46-year-old Vicky Knowles, didn't want her cancer struggle to be for nothing. So she started Wig Bank London, a website which provides top-quality donated wigs at a highly reduced price, specifically for women who have lost their hair as a result of chemotherapy. Now, wigs usually cost up to £100, but the Wig Bank London sells them for as little as £10, with the proceeds going to the South East London Breast Cancer Trust Select, the same charity that supported Vicky throughout her own cancer journey. And as I said, delighted to say she's sitting here in the studio with me now, looking great.
Thank you.
Feeling better, all done and dusted?
I hope so, yeah. It's been sort of just over a year since I was diagnosed.
Once you'd had your diagnosis and you knew that you were going into chemotherapy, were you told, was it all made clear to you what was likely to happen to you?
In regards to hair, you mean, or just in general? I mean, yes, they do go through it absolutely thoroughly. So my first consultation with my oncologist, he went through everything, and I think different ladies or different gentlemen have different regimes, and mine was going to be 4 of something called EC chemo, and the first 4 were the harshest. They were the most vile, and he said usually you will lose your hair about 15 days into the process.
In front of you, and I want you to hold it up so that that camera there can see it clearly. There it is, breast cancer. So not only the wig project, which is terribly important, and saves people money, because it will happen to them, that's no doubt. But that's a brilliant book that you've penned yourself, which is other tips, warnings, reminders, preparatory things for any women who get that diagnosis.
Absolutely, so I started writing this. I mean, basically, when I started going through it, it became apparent to me that I was quite stoic, and that, I was possibly stronger than a lot of ladies who go through this. It became apparent when I was going to my sort of weekly chemo sessions. And the one thing that I would go dressed in, if you like, was this, which was my wig. So this was custom made for me. And I remember a lady who I met sort of weekly, and she sort of said to me, "You don't look sick, why are you here?" She said, "I know it's a silly question because I know why you're here." And I said, "Well, it's just this, and I'm bald as anything underneath." But at that moment, having spoken to her at the end of the day when I said goodbye, she said, "You've helped me so much." And I just thought, I want to help other ladies. So apart from starting the Wig Bank, I started writing, because I really wanted to sort of share my tips and almost like a blueprint, because for me, when it happened, it was the most unbelievable thing. You never imagine it's going to be you, because I think you can't possibly comprehend what it would feel like.
I said to you at the beginning about the Wig Bank particularly. Had you been, as it were, forewarned by by your doctors and your medical team? What's in the book that most surprised you that happened that you weren't expecting?
Do you know what? One of the things that I really didn't know was how little you're told. I mean, my medical team were amazing, but it's only with regards to standard treatment. So I discovered that there are a myriad of things that you can do to help yourself. Not only to stop the side effects from the chemotherapy, but to almost improve your prognosis. Things that I think the medical profession know about. They're starting to sort of cotton onto these things like off-label drugs, etc. But they're not standard treatments, so they're not.
What are the sort of things that the charity that I think, let's call it profits to cut to the chase, but the surplus that the Wig Bank makes, what are the other things that they do? Are they a research charity? Are they a support charity?
So it was actually my amazing neighbour Jackie, who on my day of diagnosis, she was also a 5-year cancer survivor herself, breast cancer. So I messaged her and said, I've just been diagnosed, and she rushed over in her dressing gown and she hugged me, and it was her sister who was one of the co-founders of the South East London Breast Cancer Trust. So I was put in touch with them, and literally the day after my diagnosis, I was on a Zoom support call with them. And so they set it up because they wanted to raise money for hospitals that didn't have the latest equipment. But they also offer amazing support to people by doing a monthly support sort of catch-up. So that was invaluable for me, and I just wanted to give any...
Do some women also, as it were, need counselling to say, look, you know, the wig thing, yeah, not a big deal, it's fun?
I mean, yeah, for some ladies, it is the most devastating part of this happening to them, losing their hair. For me, it wasn't so much because, to be honest, my hair was pretty rubbish prior. So, and I knew about a lady called Jennifer Effie, who is a specialist hairdresser in London. So when I knew I was going to lose my hair, I got in contact with her. So she sort of measured my head up and she made this wig out of real hair. This costs a lot of money, and not everybody can afford that.
And may I ask what I suspect a lot of people listening and watching our conversation will be thinking at the moment, how are you at the moment?
I'm good. Thank you.
Remission?
I hope. Yeah.
Sorted?
Yeah. I mean, I was really, really lucky. It was caught early. I basically found something randomly. I just found a little sort of lump and I was lucky enough to have private health insurance through my job.
And what's the turnover of the wig bank? How many units, if I can call it that, are you looking for each week, each
Not
month,
many
each year?
at all at the moment, because I only started. So obviously it's only been just over a year since I was diagnosed. So I've fitted a lot into the year. I've written a book. I've set up a website to support ladies, and Wig Bank is part of that. So
if somebody listening, let's say, down in Kent, because a friend of mine, a MP down there, Tracy Crouch, whose sister shaved her head in support of her sister to show that, you know what, actually losing your hair is not the end of the world, and raised a lot of money for Tracy's charity as well. But if somebody listening down in Canterbury or anywhere else across the country wanted to do the Wig Bank thing as well, is it franchised?
No.
So it's online, just get in touch, you'll talk them through it?
Yeah, I mean, the original Wig Bank was set up by a lady called Elizabeth Cameron, I believe. So I got in touch with Elizabeth and I said, would you mind awfully if I set up something? And I think the reason why there's a regional sort of accent to it is because I think the idea with her was that you could eventually meet up locally. So you don't have to just look at the wigs online. You can go and see and try them on. And I would love to be able to do that eventually. So anybody, I believe, can set one up. She was really lovely when I got in touch, and she said, I'd be more than happy to help you through it. But I just wanted to do something, you know, I think because I was strong through my treatment and I felt physically strong and mentally strong, I just wanted to help other ladies. And it would be lovely if there was a thing for guys as well, you know.
Vicky Knowles, you've done a great thing for many people. The book is recommended for any women who have had the diagnosis, because it's not only about the wig thing, but the wisdom of Vicky is in that book as well there. And if you are kind enough to buy it, it's available online, I guess.
Amazon, Audible.
Amazon as well. There you go.
I've narrated.
Just hold it up once more so people can get the title of it. It is
Thank you.
Breast Cancer, and it's Vicky Knowles, and it's got an illustration that makes it crystal clear what it's talking about there on the front cover. So if you are embarking upon that journey, there's a guidebook that will help you. And thank you for everything that you've done for all of those women out there with the Brilliant Wig Bank. And look it up if you think you can help them and support them.
Yeah, I need wig
because
donations.
it only works with the support of other people out there. Vicky Knowles, great to meet you.
Thank you so
much. And again,
much
thank you very, very much indeed. Vicky Knowles, the founder of Wig Bank London. Now, time for, as I said a little earlier, Sunday Savings as well, where we offer you advice on where you can save money during the cost of living crisis. Local convenience stores like Tesco Express and Sainsbury's Local offer can offer a lifeline in terms of convenience, if not cost, for many people. But new research by consumerisation Which magazine shows that they are not actually very good for your wallets. Which found that you could be actually spending hundreds of pounds more a year rather than by doing that, rather than going to getting your groceries from the larger branded stores, whether they Waitrose, Sainsbury, whatever it might be. So there we are. Joining me now to tell me more about all of this is money editor of the Daily Mirror and Mirror Money, Levi Winchester, and there she is. Great to see you again. You drew our attention to this. When the team told me, and I read the thing, I said, well, to be honest, that doesn't really surprise me. But the other thing about these local mini Sainsbury's and mini Tesco's is that they also pose a real challenge to other local convenience stores, 7-Elevens, the people we rely on when we remember that we've forgotten the milk or whatever it might be.
Absolutely, yes. Lovely to be here speaking to you again. And absolutely. So the findings from which highlight the difference in price between those traditional larger supermarkets and their smaller convenience stores. So the difference in price really was found to be very substantial. So for Tesco shoppers, which found the average difference between a larger supermarket and a smaller Tesco Express, could add up to a massive yearly difference of £817.91. And for Sainsbury's, the average yearly difference between a larger store and a Sainsbury's local was found to be £477.93. And you're absolutely right. We often use these convenience stores for little top-up shops. For example, if you've run out of milk, or you forgot something for dinner, or even if you just want to avoid doing a big shop. But of course, as we know, food prices are rising. The ONS says food inflation.
We're both journalists who love a headline, and the headline on this, quite simply, is that convenience can cost.
Absolutely. And we're all trying to save money right now. And yeah, absolutely, it is a more expensive way to shop, particularly, as you said earlier, if you can't physically get to a bigger shop. I should also just add that in response to the Which research, Sainsbury's says its Sainsbury's local stores are located in city or town centre locations. So it claims its operating costs, for example, rent and rates, are higher as a result. And Tesco said it works hard to ensure our customers get great value, whether that be in a larger store or in an express store. But yeah, absolutely, you are right. If you are able to get to a larger store, you are going to find a lot of items that are cheaper.
You also, when you were talking to the team and they approached you and said, we'd love you to come back on again and chat to Alastair about all of this, and you said yes, which was very kind of you. You said you also had some fresh tips about when to shop and what kind of state of mind you should be in or you should avoid being in if you have to go shopping.
Absolutely. Lots of ways you can save money in the supermarket. So first of all, be organised and meal prep for the week. So literally sit down, write a list of everything you're going to need for the meals ahead for the next few days. By doing this, you're more likely to be able to do one big shop if you can, so you won't need to keep doing them little top-up shops at them small convenience stores. And you'll also have a much better idea of what you already have in the cupboards if you're planning in advance. So that will save you on buying certain items twice and wasting money where you don't need to. If you are meal planning, obviously use a comparison website such as trolley.co.uk to look for the cheapest prices. That will help you know which stores to go to. And yeah, absolutely, it may sound silly, but don't shop on an empty stomach. This will help you to avoid impulsive spending. And also use a smaller trolley or basket so you're much more aware of how much you're buying. And another couple of really good tips as well, when it comes to those bigger supermarkets, look down the world food aisles, even the baby aisles, because you'll often find products that are much cheaper than regular aisles.
There you go. Wisdom from Which magazine, and also unique wisdom from Levi Winchester there, who is a good friend of this programme's and the money editor at the Daily Mirror. And that is, I'm afraid, all that we have time for today, but I'm delighted that we ended on a high there with Levi, because always such helpful, useful tips for how to make those pounds go a little bit further, when to shop, state of mind, preparedness, and indeed what shops perhaps occasionally to avoid. That's it for today, but I'm delighted to say that I will be back next weekend on Saturday from midday. But for now, from me and from the whole team, enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of your weekend. A very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Now looking ahead to the start of the new week, and it'll be dry for many with some frost and fog. Though looking across the north, the breeze will start to pick up as these weather fronts start to make a little bit of eastwards progress towards that high. And it will also bring a few outbreaks of rain as we head into the new working week. But back to this evening and overnight, and with some clear spells around for northern and western areas, we could just see a few patches of mist and fog forming. Be mostly cloudy elsewhere, though we might start to see a few clear spells developing in the far southeast towards the early hours that could just bring a few patches of fog. Be a mostly mild night with all that cloud around, but there could just be a patch of rural frost for northern and eastern areas. So a cloudy start to start the new week, though as we head through the day on Monday, that cloud will start to lift and break and will bring some sunny spells, particularly as we head into the late morning and the early part of the afternoon. Temperatures will be once again above average for the time of year, with highs of 10 to 12 across the south. Now, as we go ahead into Monday evening and overnight, with a few more in the way of clear spells, there's a greater risk of frost and fog. The greatest chance of seeing fog will be across the southeast, so we've got the lightest winds through Monday night. Though there'll be some cloud moving into the west, bringing some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle and a stronger breeze too, so a milder night here. Though with those clear spells, a cooler night in the east and a chance of seeing a patchy rural frost. So into Tuesday, we've got that cloud moving in from the west, bringing some outbreaks of rain and drizzle to the far north and west, with the best chance of any sunny spells in the south and east. Looking through the rest of the week, it'll be generally settled for many, with a few outbreaks of rain towards midweek and temperatures above average.
On GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in